Welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. I am your dumbass host, Scott Kennedy. We're going to try and keep this off mute and have a good time. And one of the things we're going to try and talk about is grades. We're going to hit on some grades, and we're going to hit on some of the changes that need to be made, some of the changes that are going to be made no matter what, based on contracts, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I was just talking about before I realized that before I got down to the chat and everybody says, "Hey, dumbass, you're muted." Was Rich McKay. Okay. Now this is a good story, so I am going to repeat it. And what I had heard, and again, I would not write this in an article on SI. It's too much speculation. It's not sourced. It's not any of that stuff. So if you're on Atlanta Falcons SI, I would never put this in writing. But what I heard about Rich McKay is there was an internal mole hunt, and you remember when Arthur Smith got fired, the two people that came out was Arthur Blank and Rich McKay, and they acted up there all smug, like they were all smug, like they had it all figured out. They were really good at hiring coaches. Well, they got 7 straight losing seasons now, don't they? Right after Raheem Morris was hired, Rich McKay was moved off of day-to-day operations of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I heard, again, pure speculation, so don't sue me, was that the Falcons had kind of run an internal mole hunt to see who was leaking information out. And the name, like, where I'd tell you one thing, I'd tell you one thing, and I'd tell you one thing. 3 different things to 3 different people and see which ends up leaking and ends up getting out. And it was Rich McKay. And right after that process, he got moved off Atlanta Falcons. So Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot don't report. Rich McKay is not really involved in operations for the Atlanta Falcons anymore. So we can blame him up to this point, but we can't do that anymore for the most part. He's not really involved in this anymore. He got moved off day-to-day operations right after Raheem Morris was hired. But Raheem Morris, and you can still blame Blank. And the conversation there was, he's a good guy and a good owner. He runs a great business. The Falcons make a ton of money. He's a great guy to work for, but I agree. As far as competitive nature, he needs a little bit more fire in him. Well, we have a family atmosphere here, and we don't want to bring in Belichick because too many people might be threatened. Brother, you haven't been to the playoffs in 7 years. You haven't had a winning season in 7 years. It's time to make some people feel a little uncomfortable, is what I think about on that. So I don't think it's McKay anymore, and I do think there's a little bit too much comfort there. And one of the moves that absolutely needs to get made, as I was doing, there's a couple articles I edited yesterday. One was Alex Smith ripping the Atlanta Falcons for how they handled the quarterback position in the offseason. We've been through that a zillion times. And the other one was the headline I used was Atlanta Falcons cannot let Michael Penix become next Matt Ryan. Now on X, everybody for the most part pretty got that, read the article, commented, "Oh, great article. The defense really did let Matt Ryan down, et cetera, et cetera." Facebook people are like, "What do you mean? Well, Matt Ryan was great." And like, guys, read the article. I started responding that way. What do you mean by that? Well, here's an article that helps explain it. Yes, I'm a huge smartass, dumbass and smartass today. But as I was going through that, the Atlanta Falcons defense, this isn't something new. Frankly, this is probably the worst coached defense I've ever seen at the college level or the pro level. This is probably the worst one I've ever seen. I'm going to put this in my mental rankings list. The worst coached offense I ever remember seeing was a 2003 Auburn Tigers. We can get into that on another day. So that's how long I keep this mental Rolodex. When I think of the worst coached defenses I've ever watched, the 2024 Atlanta Falcons is now going to be etched in my memory forever. We can get into the ugly stats if you want to some other time. Now, getting back into this, why can't Michael Penix looks good? He's got time. He's only played 3 games, okay? But the early returns are really good. He's got a wow arm on him for sure. He can make all kinds of throws. If he had played earlier in the season, he might not have missed as many of the open throws later in the season. We got two 24-year-old rookie quarterbacks going to the playoffs in Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. Meanwhile, the Falcons decided to shelve their 24-year-old rookie quarterback and instead spend a bunch of money on Kirk Cousins, which was always moronic, which is what I said the day after the draft. You aren't good enough to put $50 million a year into Kirk Cousins and think you're actually going to win anything. So if that's the case, put that money into building a team around a 24-year-old rookie and go to work. You would have been better off at the end of the season, and now you won't have a $65 million dead cap hit at the end of the year. But Matt Ryan in his 14 years played with one top 10 defense. One. He had a couple top 10. I think he had like 3 or 4 maybe in top 10 in scoring. But as far as total offense goes, total defense goes, one. He had one. Tom Brady played 20 years for the New England Patriots. He had 15 top 10 scoring defenses. 15. Matt Ryan, Atlanta Falcons, we beg you, do not let Michael Penix become the next Matt Ryan. Do not. A fantastic quarterback who puts up a ton of numbers, carries a team into thinking that you're better than you are, and gets let down by mismanagement through the years. You've got to start building this defense. Now, as I started looking farther back, y'all know how many top 10 defenses the Falcons have had since 1980, which is the first season I was alive remembering about the Atlanta Falcons. I was 7. I turned 8 years old the day before the Falcons gave up 20 points to the Dallas Cowboys in the divisional in the second round of the playoffs. I was 8. Since 1980, the Falcons have three top 10 defenses. 3. That's almost statistically impossible. It's almost statistically impossible to be that bad in a league where they reward you for being bad. If you're that bad for that long, you should get better, unless there's something else going on with this team and this franchise. Only had 2 owners. The Smiths were awful. They didn't give a damn about the Atlanta Falcons and winning. And I think Arthur Blank is just, what have we said? His biggest flaw is he's too loyal to his own people. He needs some ruthless streak in him. He needs some ruthlessness in him right now. And I don't know if it's going to happen. And if I look at the Jimmy Lake situation and how bad this defense was, and again, it was the worst coach defense I think I've ever seen. Just obvious stuff. Like, I said we could do a list of everything. But, you see a nickel front on 3rd and 2, and they just run it. You see the final play of the game. They had 3 down linemen in. They were in a 3-4 on the final play of the game on 1st and 1 from the 1st and goal from the 1-yard line. 3 down linemen in. Just run it right up the middle. It's like, it's unbelievable how, if an idiot like me can figure this out, pick out this is not going to work pre-snap. I can look at it. There's no chance you're going to stop this. What do you think an NFL guy is going to do that actually lives this? They're going to shred the Falcons defense. How bad was the Falcons defense in the second half of the season? They were 2-6 down the stretch. Okay. They were 2-6 down the stretch. Their only 2 wins came against the New York Giants, who are, let's see, did they win? I think they did win. So I think they're 3-14. They were 3-4. Yeah, the New York Giants are 3-14, and they were on their 3rd quarterback, which was didn't the Falcons play against Drew Lock? And then the other win in that 2-6 stretch was against the Las Vegas Raiders, who finished 4-13. They were also on their 3rd quarterback, and that was Desmond Ridder. Well, we know about Desmond Ridder. If you throw out those 2 games, the Atlanta Falcons defense and the Atlanta Falcons in the second half of the season went 0-6. They went 0-6, and they gave up 31.8 points per game in those 6 losses. How bad is that? The Carolina Panthers were last in the NFL by 4 points. By 4 points, they were dead last in the NFL in scoring defense at 31.5. So the Falcons' 0-6 record, if you throw out the 2 teams tanking in the second half of the season, the Atlanta Falcons were actually worse than the Carolina Panthers in scoring defense. The second worst team in the NFL in scoring was the Dallas Cowboys, and I think they were 27.5. They were 4 points difference. So Carolina was so bad that they were 4 points behind the 31st team. So if I go to the 31st team and say they were 27.5 and I take 4 points from them, it goes up to 19. So the Dallas Cowboys at 31 were closer to 19 in scoring defense than they were to 32. That's how bad the Carolina Panthers scoring defense was this year. Falcons were worse in those 6 games. The Falcons were worse. It's really, the more you dig into it, the stats are for losers thing. The more you dig into it, the more you realize how big of losers this defense really was. And there's a say, well, Scott, they lack this, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. I get it. D. Alford was exposed. Mike Hughes is just a guy. The edges are meh. Once Troy Anderson went down, I have no speed at the linebacker position. I get it. But 32 points per game, and you're lining up in schemes and in formations that you can see, that any idiot can see in pre-snap, has no chance of succeeding. It goes beyond personnel. It absolutely goes beyond personnel. We've been through a lot of heartache in Atlanta, and frankly, as I've gotten older, I don't fan nearly as much as I used to, by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I think of 2 of my happiest moments as a sports fan were 94, when I was a student at Auburn. We went down to Florida and upset the number 1 Florida Gators with Terry Bowden as coach in 94. Being in that stadium was one of my happiest moments. When Morton Anderson in 1998 kicked the field goal through against the Minnesota Vikings, that was as much as I've ever cheered in my life. I mean, that was one of my happiest sports moments. Doesn't really happen like that for me anymore. And as it starts to chip away, I couldn't stand. I knew Steve Sarkisian when I was out in California as director of scouting, and he was a college football coach. I knew him. He's not a good person. When the Falcons handed the 2016 number 1 offense over to him in 2017, I was pissed. Especially, who all do you have on that staff? Shanahan was going to move on. He was going to be a head coach. You're not keeping him. But didn't you have both LaFleurs? You have Mike McDaniel. I mean, that staff was loaded on offense. You give it over to Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian engineered the biggest drop-off in the history of the NFL for a number 1 offense from 2016 to 2017. The biggest drop-off in history. He kept his job. Why do I say this? Because this is the feeling I get right now with Jimmy Lake. The Falcons started 1-4. When you did not fire Steve Sarkisian, you signaled to the rest of the team, we're not serious. We're not serious about winning. If Jimmy Lake is back in 2025, I get the same feeling. This team will come out and be like, are you joking? We went 0-6, giving up 32 points down the stretch, and this guy's going to be back. That is the same feeling I've got if Jimmy Lake. And the longer this goes on, the more nervous I am. Everybody else is firing everybody, but the Falcons haven't done anything yet. That makes me nervous that it's Wednesday already after 2 days after Black Monday, and Jimmy Lake is still employed by the Atlanta Falcons. That makes me nervous. Denver Luke, appreciate you coming with a super sticker. Thank you so much. Appreciate the support, helping to keep my forehead nice and shiny. And I'm glad our numbers have doubled, once I went off of mute. So I'm actually going to delete this from existence after the fact and re-upload it as a separate video, because I totally screwed it up at the beginning. If you want to laugh, go watch the beginning and watch my talking head on mute. But thank you, Denver Luke. Couple of questions I saw in here, a couple of things I want to hit on that I had in my notes that I know I want to hit on, and I wanted to try and click on somebody because I know some other people had said it, and I can't find it now. I apologize, but one of the things where I hear that Kirk Cousins might be back. No. This is what the Atlanta Falcons leak to an agent, to a reporter, to anything. So they get that out there so they don't lose every semblance of leverage in the offseason. That's standard operating procedure, okay? And, those of y'all that are saying, well, he's under contract, just keep him for the next year. This isn't Madden. These are people that we're dealing with. One, if you keep Kirk Cousins beyond March 12th, the start of the new league year, he gets an extra $10 million. So your dead cap number in 2026 goes from $25 million. It goes up to It goes up to $35 million. You don't want that. And people are like, oh, it's just $10 million. That doesn't mean anything to blank. That might be true. But when I look at $10 million, and we've done this before. I've talked to you all about this before. It moved to 2025. But in 2024, I think there were only 5 players. Yeah, there were only 5 players on the 2024 Atlanta Falcons that had a cap number above 10 million. Jesse Bates was 6 at 10 million exactly. His was exactly at $10 million. So you only had 5 players that had a cap number over $10 million. So $10 million is not nothing. That's one of your top 6 highest paid players on a 53-man roster. That matters. Plus, that's somebody else's $10 million. You think I want to write a check if I'm Arthur Blank for $10 million to Kirk Cousins just to keep him on a backup because you guys screwed up? No. But the top 5 cap hits: Kirk Cousins, $25 million this year. Jake Matthews, $22 million. Grady Jarrett was $20 million. Caleb McGarry was $12.5 million. Kyle Pitts was $10.5 million. And then Jesse Bates was next. Those were the top cap numbers for the Atlanta Falcons. The other part of this, again, you are not dealing with Madden. These aren't just numbers on a screen where your computer. These are people. If you sign Kirk Cousins to $90 million guaranteed to talk about, hey, let's go compete for something, knowing that one of the reasons he left Minnesota is because they wanted to draft his backup and draft his replacement instead of building the team around him. Draft his replacement right away, which Kirk Cousins said was, shocking. His camp said it was shocking after it happened. Bench him after 14 games, and then you want to put him on the shelf in 2025 as a backup. Good luck. Good luck in free agency. When you've got his agent, all these agents talk, all the players talk. Good luck trying to get a free agent with the agent. And Kirk Cousins out there saying, these guys are backstabbing liars, blah, 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 all this type of stuff. No, you take your medicine. You screwed up signing Kirk Cousins. You screwed up. Admit it. They won't admit it publicly, but you will be gone. Kirk Cousins will be gone. This will be exactly like it would be with Kirk Cousins. And John coming in and saying the Falcons would pay more this offseason if we release Kirk. No, you wouldn't. That's one of the other things. You wouldn't. It would be about the same because, I had said from the very beginning that this was a 2-year deal, and then you'd have a $25 million dead cap hit in 2026. That he would be a total of $65 million dead if you release him before the new league year. If you keep him, that extra $10 million comes on. So it would be a $75 million dead cap hit across 2 years, or it'd be $35 million in 2026. So you pay him $40 million, and then you take a $35 million dead cap hit, and you've got a disgruntled player on your roster. Well, what about trading him? As John says, plus Kirk has a no trade clause. He does, and he's not going to do any favors for the Atlanta Falcons. This is exactly like Russell Wilson. He has to agree to a trade. Let's say the Cleveland Browns. That's a number that has come around a lot. A name that's come around a lot. The Cleveland Browns. They need a quarterback. They've got a worse cap situation, a worse quarterback contract than the Atlanta Falcons. They've got the worst probably in the history of the game in Deshaun Watson. You trade Kirk Cousins. You come up with a deal with Kirk Cousins, and Kirk said, we say, okay, we'll do, we'll take a 6th-round pick. That's all we're going to do. They send you a 6th-round pick, and we want $5 million in salary to pick up. Well, that weakens the Cleveland Browns. Now Kirk is going to the Cleveland Browns, and they are now weaker because they're less a draft pick and they're less $5 million. No, I'm not going to do that trade. You don't want me. Cut me. And I will sign with the Cleveland Browns for $1.25 million, and they will keep their draft picks because there's offsetting language. Whatever Kirk Cousins is paid by his next team goes to, even if he's cut, whatever Kirk Cousins is paid in 2025 comes back to the Atlanta Falcons. Just like Russell Wilson. You know what Russell Wilson was paid this year by the Pittsburgh Steelers? $1.2 million. That actually went back to the Broncos. The Broncos took on an $85 million dead cap hit across 2 seasons. I think it was 52 this year, 50 or 52 this year, and then 23 next year. Falcons are in a similar situation. when they make this move, they will take a $40 million dead cap hit in 2025, which is what he was due to earn anyway. So it's cap neutral, so to speak. But, wouldn't that $40 million been nicer to put into the defense? And it was scheduled to balloon to $57 million in 2026. So he wasn't ever going to have a $57 million dead cap hit. If he was playing lights out, they would have restructured. And if he's not, they would have cut him and taken a $25 million dead cap hit. That's what's happening now. It's basically, if you cut him, it's the same as keeping him, except you don't have a disgruntled player on the team anymore, as far as the salary cap numbers work out. But wouldn't it have been a lot better to put that money into the defense? I actually, we've said this before, and I haven't really made a big deal out of this, but the Minnesota Vikings pretty much had the offseason that we had speculated the Atlanta Falcons should have. As part of this, the Falcons were ripped by Alex Smith. The Falcons spent $90 million guaranteed on Kirk Cousins. The Vikings went and got a cheap bridge and Sam Darnold. They struck gold on that. That was, I'm going to almost call that a fluke. Nobody expected that. So I'm not saying, oh, you could have had Kirk Cousins. I'm not hindsight grade. I mean, you could have Sam Darnold. I'm not hindsight grading on that one at all. The guy's a Pro Bowler. Nobody saw that going. But, a cheaper bridge, and then if your rookie beats him out, because someone in the comments said, well, if they had signed Sam Darnold, people would have lost their minds because he was so bad in Carolina. I'm like, no, they didn't. For $10 million, they would have expected him to be a backup to the 24-year-old rookie like the Washington Commanders and Denver Broncos did. Then they went and got Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Jonathan Grenard, 3 defensive players. Their total for that was, I think, $73 million. For that, they got almost 30 sacks, 250 tackles, and a Pro Bowl bridge quarterback. Forget the quarterback, because he, for $10 million, you would have just hoped he was a backup here in Atlanta, and Michael Penix would have been started, the 24-year-old rookie, just like Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. And then they also traded up and got Dallas Turner. So they got 4 defensive players after, they had invested in their quarterback of the future with the number 10 pick. After they invested in the offensive skill guys in Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, very similar to how the Falcons had done it with Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, et cetera, et cetera. And, they got a little lucky for sure. But let's say that Sam Darnold was just okay and they finished 8-9, but wouldn't it have been nicer to be 8-9 and have $40 million next year and not have a $65 million dead cap and have Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Blake Cashman? Wouldn't that have been nicer? Wouldn't that have been nicer? And what's interesting, as Earl says, it could have gotten Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was enamored with Arthur Smith for some reason. He was enamored with Arthur Smith. So I don't know how hard the Falcons tried to get. I don't think they tried to get Russell Wilson at all. But Russell Wilson seemed like he wanted to go play for Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith, and the Steelers. But what was interesting is I would have rather had Justin Fields. Justin Fields led the team to a 4-2 record. Would have been a 1-year deal. Was cheap. Make Chicago pick up some of his salary. Have him become your bridge quarterback or backup. May the best man win. If he beats out Michael Penix, so be it. That's kind of how I would have done that. Let me see here on some of the Edward Brown has a very good suggestion here. What about Jared Mayo for defensive coordinator? I'd take it. Right now it would be just right now I'm in the camp of take care of business first, anyone but Jimmy Lake. Cause I'm not real big on hyperbole. I might say the most, the best, or that type of stuff, but I mean it. The Atlanta Falcons 2024 defense was the worst setup schematic team I've ever watched. Now, I don't watch everybody, so don't say, well, Scott, what about the 1984 Detroit Lions who gave up 40 points a game? I didn't watch them, okay? I didn't watch them. I don't watch everybody, let's be clear on that. But when you go through this team, we've talked about some of the deficiencies. It was naive going into the season without making a change to the defensive secondary. It was naive. They were forced to make a change when DeMarco Hellams got hurt. And in August, they go and get Justin Simmons. But before that, going into the season, what are the biggest questions? Safety 2 next to Jesse Bates. DeMarco Hellams still is a question. Even if he comes back healthy, he's still a question. He played limited roles as a rookie. D. Alford in the slot. Clark Phillips is fairly unproven still at this point. And Mike Hughes is just a guy. Okay, so that was naive. And you didn't address that at all. I understand that. Once Troy Anderson went down, you lacked any speed at the linebacker position. So why do you move back and create more space? If I don't have speed, the last thing I want is more space. So I'm not dropping my safeties 15 to 20 yards back if I don't have any speed at the linebacker position. I'm moving forward and putting more pressure on the team. David Onyemata regressed in a big way. Those are some of the changes that will be made. I do not expect David Onyemata to be back at all. Grady Jarrett might do a restructure. His contract is flexible. Next year, he's got his 2025 cap number is 20.4. His dead cap number is just 4. So there's $16 million in savings there. When we start talking, how are the Falcons going to get some savings in their salary cap? There's $16 million. Now, we love Grady's one of my all-time favorite players. He is not playing like a $20 million defensive tackle right now coming off his injury. So you're going to have the hard conversation. Grady, do you want to do a restructure and let's knock your cap number down to 10? Or do you want to get cut and we're going to take a $4 million dead cap number? He might want to get cut at this point. He's been here forever and he hasn't seen a winning season in 7 years. He might say, let me go to free agency. We'll see, because the Falcons 2024 draft was all about the future. There wasn't a contributor in there if things had gone to plan. Michael Penix contributed this year. That was by accident. But there wasn't a contributor in there. When you say first round pick, Michael Penix was scheduled to be a backup for 2 years. Ruka Rohuro was scheduled to back up David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett. Braylon Trice was scheduled to maybe get some time at one of the edge positions, but not a starter. Brandon Dorless, again, see Ruka Rohuro. JD Bertrand, 4th linebacker. Zion Logue, cut. Didn't even make the team because you already had 6 defensive linemen. Then a couple special teams wide receivers and running backs and Jace McClellan and Casey Washington. So they've addressed the idea that my 30-somethings are going to have to go. Kirk Cousins is on his way out. They were hoping that would be 2026, but it'll be 2025. David Onyemata will be on his way out. Grady Jarrett, you have some flexibility there, and now it's time for Ruka Rohuro and Brandon Dorless, and then whoever else you can add to them to come in and contribute. So this should be the year 2025 where the 2024 draft makes its impact, because it wasn't going to be this season. You could just look at a depth chart and figure that one out. Tackman, he says Jarrett was a dog at Clemson. Jarrett's been a dog with Atlanta. I mean, his dad's my all-time favorite Atlanta Falcon, and Grady's in the top 5. So in there. And Joe Dirt, this is kind of what I was saying also. He says, remember, the only reason they got Judon and Simmons was due to injury. Exactly. They lost a couple of injuries. They were ready to go with Braylon Trice as one of the backups, and DeMarco Hellams. Desperation moves, just like they handled the quarterback situation. They gave up. They didn't give up too much for Justin Simmons. The third is going to hurt this year because you didn't even get a third. Now, if you get 10 to 12 sacks from Judon, you're probably in the playoffs, and it would have been worth a 3rd-round pick. So that was a bad move. Let me see here. We talked some of my notes here that I hit on. Kirk Cousins returning. No, not going to happen. Went through that earlier. Jimmy Lake, he's just got to be gone, or you're just sending an awful signal to the team, to the fan base, to the Atlanta Falcons. Raheem Morris has a lot of negative energy right now from the fan base. That's to be expected, but head coaches don't get fired after 1 year, typically. Unless everything completely implodes, which you can't say that it did. And you can typically sacrifice your coordinators one time and survive. So Jimmy Lake can't be around. Now, grades. Let's get into some grades here. What do y'all think about that? At quarterback position, I'd probably go a C from total grades. Kirk Cousins started off the season really well, fell off a cliff, and then Michael Penix showed flashes, but his overall numbers were just okay. Now, for the future, do you think, what does the quarterback look like? I'm very hopeful for what the quarterback looks like, but the quarterback play for the course of the season was probably a C. Yeah, Jared Mayo, and Roy says Jared Mayo was gone after 1 year. I think Antonio Pierce was too. So it's happening. It's maybe happening more often because Nathaniel Hackett got it before the season was over. His first year, that was such a disaster. But I would go C across the quarterback position. And being that you spent $90 million guaranteed and a number 8 pick on the quarterback position in the offseason, C is an F. C isn't good enough. C wasn't good enough. The running backs are an A or an A plus. I mean, really. I was seeing I saw one of those advanced metrics on there that was like, runs over expected or make guys that miss, win percentage. Bijan Robinson was number 1 and Tyler Algier was number 5 as far as that goes. I love Tyler Algier. I love Bijan Robinson. I come from an era when the running backs and linebackers were the cool people. Those were the cool sports. So I love watching those guys play. I would definitely go an A on that. Wide receiver, I'd be willing to go almost A again on this. When you think about the seasons that Drake London had, who finished number 4 overall in yards, congratulations, Drake. That big stat padding day against the Carolina Panthers actually moved him into top 5. It moved him up to number 4. A bona fide number 1 receiver. I don't think there's any doubt there. Darnell Mooney exceeded expectations, knocked on the door of 1,000, was missed on that in the last week. Ray-Ray McCloud had a better than expected season. That I would probably go A there as well. I go to tight end. Now, if I say tight end, y'all are going to say F, but it's better than that. And why? Because of Charlie Warner. Kyle Pitts, as far as living up to expectations, Kyle Pitts is an F, for the number 4, for the unicorn, for the highest rated tight end, the highest drafted tight end in NFL history. For expectations, he's an F. But for actual play, he was just a guy. He's a C. And then Charlie Warner was one of the best blocking tight ends. And really, when he was out, you knew it. Talked about all those defensive guys that were out against the Denver Broncos. I'm like, who's going to be the biggest miss? It's not going to be Mike Hughes. It'll be Charlie Warner. Charlie Warner missed that game. So I would probably go a C on the tight end play. Offensive line play, B to B plus. The offensive line was good. The offensive line was really good. They didn't give up as many sacks they did last year, I think. That's what my seat of the pants analytics tells me. But I'd have to go back and look and double check that one for sure. And then when they wanted to and when they needed to run the ball, they could. You don't have, and especially when you had Kirk Cousins back there, who was completely immobile. The offensive line played well. I thought they did really well. Denver says a little 2nd-round mock today, 2-round mock today. Denver, I don't know the guys enough. Now I like to start that in February. The reason why is because that's when I get back from Senior Bowl. And when I get back from Senior Bowl, instead of knowing 5 guys like I do in January 8th, I know 150 guys. So I don't really want to get into, if you notice when Nick and I did a mock, I just stayed quiet. I just don't know this one. Jimmy, good to see you. He says, y'all have a good one. I'm off to work, buying my season pass still for the Falcons. Good for you. He says, see y'all for chat, draft, and free agency. Absolutely. Red and black for life. Appreciate you, Jimmy. Glad you're here. Chris Walker, let's go back to, we'll get back to the grades here after a couple questions. He says, does Algier and Robinson remind you of Andrews and Kane? Oh, I don't know. Those were both power backs to a certain extent. Kane, I always, Lynn Kane was super strong. I don't think neither of those guys had the wiggle that Bijan Robinson is. He's just different. Bijan Robinson's like a 215-pound version of who's the slot guy that came in? Eric, his dad made him a slot in the run and shoot, 1st-round draft pick of the Cleveland Browns, and came to Atlanta. He's like a 215-pound version of him, and I can't remember his name for some reason. Metcalf, thank you. Eric Metcalf. Yeah, Steven, thank you. Eric Metcalf reminds me of a big version of him. So I'd almost be more willing to go. Who was the running mate with Devontae Freeman when the Falcons had that really good 1-2 punch? Bijan's closer to Devontae Freeman, I think. But William Andrews was just a straight bull. I mean, he was a beast. So was Gerald Riggs. Like I said, we've always had good running backs here in Atlanta. We can't run the ball. It's like something's completely wrong. Corey says, it seems like a struggle using Algier effectively. I disagree. I think he was very effective when he was in, Corey. Tevin Coleman was who I was thinking of, Psalm. So thank you so much. And NBA says, one word, take a timeout. Yeah, no kidding. Let me see what Atlanta Falcons reference was, what their 2000, because I feel like Algier had a good season as far as the numbers go. I mean, he was for rushing yards per game he was 4.7 with 3 touchdowns on yards per game. He rushed for almost 650 yards this year. That surprises me a little bit. I didn't think he rushed for that many. I mean, that's only 30, 40 yards a game, I guess. So it shouldn't be that surprising. And Tevin Coleman was who I was thinking of. Thank you, M.A. Williams. Appreciate that. Tony Smith. Stephen B. Tony Smith is the answer to a trivia question that I was able to stump. I've written and talked about it enough now since I've had this platform that this is an easier trivia question now. But who did the Atlanta Falcons take in the first round with the first round pick they got from the Green Bay Packers for Brett Favre? The answer is Southern Miss running back Tony Smith, who was out of the league, I think, in 2 years. I think that's who it was. I think he ended up with like 600 yards from scrimmage, and they sent Brett Favre away. And Brett was a problem in Atlanta. I understand that one a little bit. He was a backup quarterback who enjoyed the life a little bit too much, and they didn't want that around. Would have been nice to have more of a culture at the time, though. If you've got a problem child, that you could develop him a little bit. It was kind of the same thing we said about Jalen Carter. When he was available, Jalen Carter going to Philly with those veterans was a good thing. Jalen Carter had a reputation for, maybe not working as hard or getting in some trouble. Wouldn't it have been nice for him to come play a year with Calais Campbell and Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata and see what it's like? So I think, that it would have been nice to have more of a culture in Atlanta in 1990. So they went from Favre to Jerry Glanville. Glanville might have been the one that traded him. Might have been right in that time. And the Falcons had a decent quarterback. You get a number 1 pick for a guy that you drafted in the second round. But yeah, that one hurts. But Tony Smith is the answer. The running back that they got. ATL Sport, good question. Will the Falcons re-sign Matt Judon, yes or no, and why? No, because he wasn't good enough. Plain and simple. They didn't pay him a ton of money. He wasn't on a ton of money. But if they want to go the cheap route again for a reserve snaps edge, they'll bring back Lorenzo Carter, who's been on a series of 1-year deals and comes back and plays for about $5 million. So it would be they'll bring back Lorenzo Carter before they bring back Matthew Judon. I don't expect Justin Simmons to be back either. When they got here, they didn't have good seasons. So their contracts are up. And if you didn't have a good season, wouldn't you want a fresh start somewhere else? So I don't think either one of those guys will be back. And I don't necessarily blame either one of them for their poor seasons. Again, I've asked this question before. Let me see, because there's an answer in here real quick. It's from Brennan. So I'll click on Brennan. When I look at the defense, who had a better year this year than last year in 2023? Well, Matt Judon and Justin Simmons were busts. All right. Who got better? Who did? Who over the course of 17 games, who played better? Brennan might say Caden Ellis. I'd agree. Caden Ellis had a hell of a year. Could use a linebacker next to him. I agree. I think you have to go and target It's basically, when I look, depending on what you do with Caleb McGarry, and I think you've got bigger needs right now than Caleb McGarry at right tackle. With 4 picks and a limited amount of money in free agency, it's almost the same needs as last year, other than quarterback and wide receiver too. I'm okay on offense. I mean, almost for all of it, I'm okay on offense. Resign Dahlman, okay? You need your center still. But you still need an edge, a pass rushing edge that can win on one-on-ones. Now, the Falcons got some sacks towards the end of the season. They basically tripled their output. As far as through 11 or 12 games, they had 10 or 11 sacks, and they got like 20 in the next 5. They went from under 1 per game to almost 4 per game. Okay. Don't be fooled. When you were watching those, how many of those did you see somebody beat their guy one-on-one? I beat the guy in front of me. I was a problem here. I saw a lot of coverage sacks. I saw a lot of hustle sacks. But I didn't see a whole lot of my guy beat your guy sacks. And you still need that, because I can scheme up protections, but if my guy can beat your guy, I'm going to win. I'm going to win those. Falcons still don't have that guy. Ebiketti's a nice piece, but he's still not winning at the point of attack as much as he should be, as much as you need to have a good edge. You still need edge. Linebacker is still a need. I felt pretty good about the linebacker position going into last season. You got Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, backup Nate Landman. I don't count on Troy Anderson anymore. You can't count on him, and he's the only one out there with enough speed to play in space. You've got to get some speed at the linebacker position. Landman and Bertrand are nice players, but they're physically limited. I still have questions at my second safety position. Justin Simmons will not be back. DeMarco Helms is coming off an injury. I've got serious questions at Simmons, and I got questions at both cornerback positions. Nickel, not both, 3 cornerback positions, nickel and cornerback 2. Mike Hughes is just a guy. D. Alford was arguably the worst nickel corner in the NFL this year. So that's where I am looking to use my resources this offseason. Denver Luke again coming in. Appreciate you, Denver Luke. He says, do you see the Falcons surprising you again in the draft? It seems like they do every year. Laugh out loud. Yeah, shame on me at this point. What's interesting is there were a lot of leaks, and maybe that goes back to what I was talking about Rich McKay. There were a lot of leaks the first 3 years under Arthur Smith. And it pretty much started leaking out that they were targeting Kyle Pitts. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I'm like, you got an aging, expensive quarterback. You've got a leaky offensive line, and you've got nobody on defense. What the hell do you need a pass catcher for? And now his rookie contract, he's through 4 years on his rookie contract. All right, let's double check that I clicked off the mute button this time since I coughed. And then the guys that were behind him in that spot, it's just heartbreaking that you could have had in 4. But that started coming out. The next year, it started coming out that they were targeting Drake London. That kind of leaked out a little bit too. And then the next year, Bijan Robinson. And a lot of it to me seemed like smoke and mirrors. I'm like, would they really, after you just had a running back set the rookie record, the franchise rookie record for offense, you're going to go running back? Really? That seems kind of strange. Now, I love Bijan, don't get me wrong, but it didn't seem like a logical use of resources in that spot. Drake London was a hit. That's not where I would have gone at that point. I still want to build defense in trenches. I think for the record, I would have gone Hamilton. He was from Marist, from Atlanta, Notre Dame safety, all pro at Baltimore now. That's where I would have gone in that spot, and Drake London is probably the more valuable player. Last year, there started to be some smoke signals that the Falcons were interested in Penix. Plus, they sent a whole team out there to watch him. For the life of me, after you spent $90 million on Kirk Cousins, I thought it was smoke and mirrors to trade down. But will they surprise? I don't know. I feel like a little bit this one's a little bit more like Bijan almost. They could take a right tackle. So yes, they could surprise me. They could take a right tackle, an offensive tackle. They could take a defensive lineman anywhere across the front 4, hopefully edge. They could go for the best inside linebacker available. They could go cornerback. they could go safety. That's 5 positions that they have big needs on. And then if, a fire-breathing wide receiver presents itself, all right, you could go any one of those directions and fill a need. The best draft is, the best prospect available that also fits a need. There's enough needs on here that one of those guys should be available. So do I expect to be surprised? No, or else it wouldn't be a surprise. What do they go tight end to get a Kyle Pitts replacement? Probably. I don't know at this point. We'll see. We got a lot of time to talk NFL draft. American Rat Ass, good to see you. Thank you so much for the support, and I appreciate this comment. And I love it when y'all come in because we get probably 10x of our viewers aren't live. They're not live. They watch after the fact. So appreciate the comment and coming in here when you get a chance to come in and say live, so I can say thank you for your support. But he says, thank you for your insight this season. I don't normally comment, but I watch as much as I can, and I appreciate you for that. Out of all the Falcons podcasts, you're my favorite. Well, that's humbling because there's a lot of good ones out there. There's a lot of good guys out there. How could I begin a career in NFL analyst and commentary? Well, American Rat Ass, there's a lot of formats now, to do this, which is one of the things that I did. Now, I'm old, and I basically got into sports media at the beginning of the internet, like right at the end of the 90s. But, YouTube didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. If you start putting out short clips, that's the big thing right now is short clips. If I was interested in building my brand as much as I could, and not necessarily with monetization, which is what I'm interested in at my age, but I was interested in building my brand, I would have very short clips, professionally sounding, and I would put them out on YouTube Shorts. I'd put them on Instagram Reels, and I'd put them out on TikTok. On those 3 to help building my brand, and then do more conversation. And if anybody asks you to be a guest or do anything like that, or ask somebody else that's doing this, hey, how can I help out? Don't be afraid to do that. So appreciate you, American Rat Ass. Absolutely. Brennan, love this. We talked about the legend, the Falcons legend, Kadarius Hodge getting a Pro Bowl spot. How awesome was that? Yes, absolutely. Let me grade the special teams. D. The special teams were a D. The Falcons did a bad job on punt coverage, kick coverage, extra points, punting, and then there's Kadarius Hodge to bring you up from being an F, because Kadarius Hodge was awesome. I love the dude. I'm an underdog. It's why we end up here rooting for teams that never win anything. But I like the underdog, and Kadarius Hodge is an underdog. He's had to work so much harder to get where he is to come up, and he's gotten a Pro Bowl nod, and I love it. I absolutely love it. As far as, and Hodge should have a place. He's a free agent this year, by the way. Kadarius Hodge is, but he should be back. I think he's shown enough as a wide receiver. Even if he's the 5th wide receiver on your team, he's got a spot on the 53. Just because he's so good on special teams. Put him on special teams and let him be wide receiver 4 or 5, and he's got a spot on my team. I absolutely love the guy. Absolutely love him. So very congratulations on the Pro Bowl nod for Kadarius Hodge. Chris Tyler says, I don't know what happened the first couple of weeks. Alfred and Hughes played very well, and then Hughes dropped off, and then Alfred vanished. Now holds the honor of the worst play in NFL history. Alfred was that spinning and fall down flat on his face against the Minnesota Vikings. First couple of weeks, you were going against Arthur Smith and Justin Fields, who was scared to death to throw the ball. That was one of them. The second week, I know this is going to sound kind of crazy. The second week was, a Monday night game and weather at Philadelphia, ESPN Falcons. Let me see this schedule on here. And what they did, again, remember, Jimmy Lake backed everybody off, and played this deep shell. Let's not give up the big play. So what happens? Justin Fields runs for, how many yards did he run for? Justin Fields runs for 57 yards. And then the next week, Jalen Hurts, and went over the Eagles. He runs for, I think it was like 80. Jalen Hurts runs for 85 yards because there's the safeties and corners are so far back in coverage. So people figure that out. It's like, well, we'll just run crossing routes and underneath, and we'll take care of that. And well, the quarterbacks weren't running as much because I don't want my quarterback running for 85 yards. I'll just throw crossing routes and screen passes because they're 5 defensive backs. They've only got 2 down linemen, 2 edges that aren't very good. They got 2 linebackers that are trying to cover, the entire field. And then they throw 5 defensive backs 30 yards behind the line of scrimmage. We'll just run crossing routes and slants. Piece of cake. So part of it was the adjustments on there. The quarterback stopped running as much because I could throw the ball underneath. So that was one of these, again, just piss poor scheming from the Atlanta Falcons. I've said it. I've probably muted the first 3 times I said it, so it's not quite as repetitive, but the worst defensive coaching I've ever seen. This was the worst coach defense I've ever watched. And again, I don't watch all of them, but I've watched the Falcons for 40-something years. Corey, good to see you. Because looking back, I wanted Peter Skoronski and Tank Bigsby, but we went Bijan and Bergeron. Which way would you go? I think the Falcons struggle to get Tyler Algier on the field. Again, I've said it before. The happiest guy in the world that Bijan Robinson is in Atlanta should be Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier has, let's see, he has 533 carries over the course of 3 seasons now. He averages 180 carries per season, which is basically 10 a game. Okay. If he didn't have Bijan Robinson, that number might have doubled. And coming out of his contract next year, he'd probably be beat up and washed up. Honestly, that's just what happens to running backs. He's going to get a good second contract now. He's going to be somebody else's Michael Turner. He's going to be a $5, $6, $7 million running back on a second contract. I don't know how good Peter Skoronski is in that spot. I think he's pretty good, but Matthew Bergeron's really good. And frankly, Matthew Bergeron might end up being a replacement at tackle. Just when they decide to make a change. Matthew Bergeron's good enough to play outside, but they needed him inside at left guard. But they could end up playing him at tackle, which makes him more valuable. Tackles get paid higher than guards. That's just the way it goes. Corey, I would have gone with a different player in Bijan's spot. I would have gone Jalen Carter. That was where, again, whether you agree or disagree, it's okay. I do not hindsight grade. And I do not change my mind based on what happened. If I would have taken Jalen Carter in that spot. Would I have been right or would I have been wrong? That's up for debate. But that's where I would have gone, knowing that I had Tyler Algier and needed some help on the defensive line. And Jalen Carter is pretty good. And again, knowing that I had Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata to help, and then they bring in Calais Campbell to help mentor Jalen Carter. But I'm happy with Bijan and Bergeron. You guys know me. I hold a grudge, and I'm not gonna complain about that one. That's for sure. Let me see here. Oh, Sean, what are you saying here? It says clown shoes takes are not reality fan takes. Keep in mind we are paying our QB spot no more than most teams pay their QB spot. Clown shoes takes are not reality fan takes. I'm not quite sure what that means. I think I'm wearing the clown shoes. And, keep in mind we are paying our quarterback spot no more than most teams pay their quarterback spot. That's true. That's true. Next year I think the cap hit will be 40 plus the let's see, what does Penix have? Penix will probably be in the 6 to 7 range. Penix is at 5.2, so your cap hit next year at the quarterback position is 45. So no, you're not paying. There's a bunch of quarterbacks that are above that. So a bunch of that are in the 50 million range and above that. But when you have a good quarterback on a rookie contract, it's a cheat code. That's $40 million now that I can't put in other places into the team. I mean, just because this is what other people are doing, other people don't have rookie quarterbacks. Bo Nix, one of the reasons that Denver was able to survive taking on this giant cap hit, even bigger hit than Kirk Cousins is going to be with Russell Wilson, is because they've got better coaching, for one, in Sean Payton and then Vance Joseph on the defensive side of the ball, and then they hit on their rookie quarterback. They absolutely hit on the rookie quarterback. Instead, the Falcons jumped into this both feet, and now you've got $40 million that you can't put in the rest of your team. Just because other people spend more in that spot, so what? That doesn't excuse the fact that it was a gigantic waste of money and resources. And a gigantic waste of money and resources is bad. It's bad. So miss me on that one, dude. It was a mistake. Let me see here, because we are about to get out of here. Let me finish up here with Sean. He says, "True, that's water under the bridge now." Yeah, it is. But we're here to have discussions. Says nothing we can do about it. Also, I wasn't referring to you as Clown Shoes. It was another person that was chat suggesting we trade Bijan. Yeah, I wouldn't trade Bijan. Come on now. He's kind of one of the faces of your franchise. Bijan's great. No problem. I wouldn't trade Bijan either. Like I said, I would in that spot. My pick was Jalen Carter, and I'm not saying, oh, you should have done this at the time. I will say that about Kyle Pitts. I was very against the Kyle Pitts pick. That one has not worked out. I wouldn't have taken Drake London. I would have gone Kyle Hamilton at the time, but Drake London is a great pick, no doubt about it. Kyle Hamilton would have been a good pick, but no problems with Drake London. I would have gone Jalen Carter in the third year of Terry Fontenot's regime. Let's finish up on Terry Fontenot, actually. But Bijan is a good pick. I got no problem with that one. Anyway, on that note, appreciate you, Sean. On that note, guys that are, I guess we didn't really finish the DL. My linebacker, my grades on the backside on the defense are so skewed by how bad it was schemed up that it's really tough. The DL played bad. I mean, they were a D-. The edge play was a C- at best. The linebacker play is probably a B, just because Caden Ellis was so good. And after that, it was probably a D. Caden Ellis was an A and everybody else was a D. That it drops it down to a B. Safety play, probably an A- for Jesse Bates and probably a D for Justin Simmons. And then at cornerback, AJ Terrell is the other one. I said, who had a better season this year than last year? I would also argue AJ Terrell had a better year this year. AJ Terrell was damn good, was really, really good this year. So that's where I think AJ Terrell was an A, and he played at a Pro Bowl level this season. It's one of the reasons why D. Alford and Mike Hughes were so exposed. And it's just frustrating knowing that you've got three players on the backside with Pro Bowl credentials, all pros in their background, and Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates, and AJ Terrell, and you still played a chicken scratch defense. That you're too scared to put any pressure on. Everybody was 15 to 20 yards off the line of scrimmage at the snap. The completion percentage underneath was absolutely diabolical. It may have come to the Falcons had the worst. Let me see if they finished the season now that all the numbers are in. They had the worst completion percentage against through the year. I can't imagine it got better. Passing defense, completion percentage, the Atlanta Falcons were worse than the NFL at 69.9% completions against. And they gave up the second most touchdowns in the NFL with 3 Pro Bowlers in the secondary. Well, Scott, what about the pass rush? Didn't get a lot better when the pass rush improved because, again, they were so soft that they're giving up 70% completion rate underneath the catch and runs. It was just really, really bad. Just really, really poor on that. We're over an hour. I've been going by myself. I'm not going to be able to talk for a week after this. Well, Scott, you were on mute for the first 10 minutes, so that doesn't count. I am going to delete this and I will re-upload it as a separate video because I'm an idiot. But I appreciate y'all sticking with me on that. It's so embarrassing. So thank you so much. I want to say, Curtis, for trying to let me know, for 10 minutes that I was muted. Denver Luke coming in with a Super Bowl. Gerard Mayo for DC talking about Edward Brown talking about Gerard Mayo. He won't be able to work long. I promise you that. Denver, we'll get into mock drafts probably the first week of February. Corey Carter talking about Algier, Denver Luke again, American Radass. Good to see you. And Corey Carter again as well. I said I'd finish up with Terry Fontenot. Last week, it's funny, before the game last week, there was some chatter that Terry Fontenot's job might not be completely safe. And frankly, it shouldn't be. I'm not saying fire him right now, but it shouldn't be safe. You just got yourself out of cap hell with Matt Ryan in 2022 when you took on a record dead cap number. And you can say, well, that necessarily wasn't Terry's fault. I agree. I'm listening. Again, when I post stuff on Twitter, people automatically assume that the 150 characters that you post there is your entire thoughts on it. This is why this is such a better format for having these discussions. But I think Arthur Blank was the one that screwed up the Deshaun Watson, Matt Ryan relationship thing, and they forced Matt Ryan's hand to request a trade. And because Thomas Dimitroff had been so bad with the contracts, Matt Ryan's contract was really, really bad. That necessarily wasn't Terry's fault, but he was still general manager when that happened. So the quarterback decision-making during his tenure and the resources spent has been a fireable offense. You run off Matt Ryan and take on a $40 million dead cap hit. You bring in Marcus Mariota, who then quits on the team midseason, and don't play a rookie to see what you've got there. So you've only got, instead of playing Desmond Ridder the second half of a lost season, you only play him the last 4 games against dead rubber competition, and you go into Desmond Ridder and anoint him the starter. And that was a disaster. Then you flush $90 million right down the drain, and you're right back in cap hell. Those are fireable offenses. Now, let's look at the draft, the first draft. Well, this was our first draft. Dude, that's not an excuse. What have you been doing up until this time that it's not like I'm taking you from baseball to football. If you hired me today to draft in April, and I came out of that draft with Kyle Pitts, Richie Grant, and Jalen Mayfield as my first 3 picks, I failed. And not having enough time is no excuse. Day 2 picks have been bad. Well, Scotty drafted, Bijan, who's really good, and Drake, who's really good, and got his quarterback of the future, who looks really good. Yeah, I'm not going to hang my hat on the fact that I picked a good player in the top 10 4 years in a row. Kyle Pitts notwithstanding. You're supposed to get good players in the top 10. What's not supposed to happen is you're not supposed to be in the top 10 4 years in a row. That's what's not supposed to happen. You're supposed to get good players. They want you to not be in the top 10. They want change. They want forced parity. They don't want the same teams losing year after year after year after year. You're not supposed to be picking in the top 10. No, I don't give you flowers for picking good players in the top 10. That's what's supposed to happen farther down the line. You make your money in this league as a GM on day 2 and day 3. So Terry Fontenot's job should not be safe. Do I think it is? Yes, I do. I think his job is tied to Michael Penix, which will be at least, I think Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot, and Michael Penix are all together. And we'll see this thing out through 2025 and 2026 to see what we've got. And if that doesn't change, I think they make a clean sweep with Raheem Morris would be out. And Terry Fontenot would be out after, 6 years and 2 coaches. So I think Terry Fontenot is safe. I think if Jimmy Lake isn't fired by the end of the week, they're sending a very bad signal to the Atlanta Falcons and to the Atlanta Falcons fans. Matthew Judon is gone. Justin Simmons is gone. I think David Onyemata is gone. That's kind of my wrap up on all of those. And I know y'all are wanting to get to talk into to draft, and we'll get into that. I'm just not ready for it yet. So when Nick gets back, we'll certainly get into that as well. Again, 70 minutes today. We really only went 60 since I just talked to my muted microphone for the first 10. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Jeremy says that Glanville was the guy who shipped Favre. I thought it was because he had a huge ego and wasn't going to stand for Brett Favre's antics as a rookie. So like I said, I wish the Falcons had a better culture at the time that they could have helped try and nurture and develop a wild horse, a wild man in Brett Favre. But we're going to get out of here. Corey Carter says Jimmy Pond. About Jimmy Puddle. I'm not going to be mean. Again, I have nothing against him. I just think he did a poor job this year. He's got plenty of money in the bank from being a previous head coach that he'll be just fine. And he'll get another job. But I don't want it to be with the Atlanta Falcons, the defensive coordinator anymore. I was willing to give him the adjustments when we were watching them play crap defense the first half of the season, super soft. I said, okay, let's see what happens. You can get away with that against Carolina Panthers and Dallas Cowboys, who are bad teams with bad offenses and who make a lot of mistakes. Let's see what happens when you go up against better teams. And they went 0-6, giving up 32 points a game in the final 8 games. They beat the Giants and the Raiders with third-string quarterbacks. I've seen enough. We will be back on Monday. Enjoy a football weekend. I guess we got some college football playoffs as well, playoff weekend. And then Nick will be back next week, but I'll see you on Monday. I certainly appreciate y'all being here. Sorry for the faux pas at the beginning, but thanks for sticking with me. Y'all have a hell of a rest of your day. Stay warm, everybody, and stay safe with the winter storm coming this way. If you don't have to go anywhere, don't. Most of us don't have tires that are equipped to handle the snow and ice. Be safe out there. Love y'all. Have a good day. Happy New Year.